groove and then get it down. Just for the funk of it. One nation and we're on the move. Stop us now.
I view music different than a lot of people. I look at it as gold or as our diamonds. That's what we created out of nothing. And it's our commodity, and I felt it was my obligation to try to protect that.
The most important thing is we have got to tell our own story.
Well, I would say that the top 40 staff didn't know. They were aware of it. They would like to have gotten those sales as well, so they could hold their chest out. But mind you, the country was divided. We're talking about the 70s, and we're also talking about the early 80s. But the country was divided, and in the 70s in particular, there was a black radio station, and there was a white radio station. And all the major companies, the few that had dual staffs, they had a black staff and they had a white staff. Mind you now, when I first went to CBS, my guys were only responsible for carrying black records. They didn't carry no top 40 records. I do remember there was a case, I had a friend of mine who worked for MCA, and a black guy, and there was an Elton John record that he crossed over to the black market. So occasionally it did go the reverse. Matter of fact, the record was called Benny and the Jets. That was the record. And my friend crossed that record over there for MCA. So that did happen occasionally, but the lines were drawn. There was the black staff and the pop staff, and you didn't cross those lines.
Was that frustrating for you?
No, it wasn't frustrating because that's the way things were. And I came from the South. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. So I was fully aware my entire life of how those lines were drawn. So you adjust and deal with it and move around them. That's exactly what happened in that case there with Bill Craig in Detroit. We adjusted, we moved around it, and we were successful. And also another thing that we did on a local basis, we tied in with the local politicians that were running for office. Let's take Detroit for instance. If there's a local politician that's running for office, well, we would tie our artists in with that politician. So at their rallies, we'd make sure that our artists were there to support them and to perform to attract and to draw the crowd. So it was just a layer upon layer upon layer in attracting people to our product, and we did everything that was necessary to do that.
What about record stores? You haven't mentioned them yet. What did you do to work with them?
Well, one thing that I started when I was a local territory salesman, naturally being a black salesman for a major record label, the bulk of my accounts were black accounts. And on the south side of Chicago and on the west side of Chicago, you had some blocks where you had as many as 3 or 4 record shops in one block. And you had all these record stores, retail record stores, and that's where you had a thing called the One Stop, where these local mom and pop shops bought their records from the One Stop. And they would go there early in the morning and buy their product and come back, and they in turn would sell it as kids were getting out of school. Now, what I did, I put all of those shops on open account status, something they never even thought about doing, which means now that they can buy directly from the manufacturer. So they can get a much better price. They also can get an advertising budget. They weren't aware of all of that. So we start with that advertising budget. They can advertise in the local newspaper, and the company would pick up the bulk of the cost of that. So I exposed them to that, and that was a godsend to them. Now also it meant that there was somewhat of a cutback in the business from the one stops, because now the one stops have lost all of that business. But what I did, I worked with the one stops also, and mind you, It's interesting story behind the one-stops in Chicago in particular. Now, the one-stops really initially was set up by the gangsters in Chicago to service all of their speakeasies. They had those jukeboxes all over town, which meant that they had records from everybody. And then they started selling them on a wholesale basis to various little mom and top record shops. And that's where that was a source of their supplies. Now also in those little mom and pop shops, I introduced them to selling accessories. One accessory being the needle which is very, very high mark upon it. Now the needle was needed for those record players. And you could go through a needle, you know, if you're playing it constantly, you're going to need a new needle very, very soon. Well, now, it was such a high markup on those needles, a little small mom and pop shop could buy, say, 150 needles for $10. And they'd sell those needles for $5 a piece. So it was a big markup on, and I pointed all that out to them, so they would stock all of those accessories. That was a godsend thing for them as well. Also, even with my staff, now I have a very large staff now on a national basis. So I educated these guys as well. So they in turn not only go into the radio stations, but go into those retail outlets as well and let them know about what's happening in open account status by directly from the manufacturer. And they took advantage of that as well.
One nation under a roof, getting down just farther from the beach. One nation and we're on the move. Stop us now.
My name is Dr. Logan H. Westbrooks, and when I found out that I had been named along with my wife in this Angels Walk, especially along the Crenshaw corridor, I was really, really excited. And when I found out about it, I rushed over just to prove to myself. And now that I am over here, it's bringing back so many fond memories. Initially, my wife and I, we made this as an investment when we purchased the Crenshaw Square. And of course, as time went on, we moved on into other things. But while we were here, we had all kinds of tenants that was renting space here, Japanese, Caucasians, black folk, female businesses. We had even a branch of the Jacobian Miles had an office here. We had a huge cleaners on anchoring on one end, on the north end of the complex. And also on the north end, there also was a branch of the Sumitomo Bank. I think it was about a 3-story building, as well as an office building on that end. Now, mind you, it was a perfect setup for an investor. On the second level, there were all offices, and on the ground floor level, there were retail spaces. And ironically, that's really the trend here today. We had a number of different restaurants. We had Korean restaurants. We had Japanese restaurants. All of those were here on the premises. And while we were here, I had a tenant, his name was Avery Clayton, who was a famous artist here on the Los Angeles scene. There were various artists that had set their wares up, and on this balcony up here, where we had this choir, this gospel choir that would be singing. So we had those sounds that were going out all over the courtway, and the hundreds of people that were coming through. And they were looking at the artists, they were meeting the artists, they were chatting with the artists, they were buying their goods, they were buying gifts, and it just was a festive occasion. Each Sunday, people were looking forward to this. Again, that logo, Art Show, every sunny Sunday. And that was the logo, every sunny Sunday.
The legacy of history and culture remains in Crenshaw Square, which is also home of the Los Angeles Sentinel, the largest Black-owned newspaper west of the Mississippi. Today, the Sentinel hosts the annual Taste of Soul, attracting 350,000 attendees each year. Spearheaded by Danny Bakewell, the Taste of Soul is the largest street festival in the city and county. Could it be that what is manifested today was inspired by the vision of yesterday?
Well, come on. One nation under a roof. Getting down just farther from the bed. One nation and we're on the move. Stop us now. Yeah. Come on. Gonna give you part of what you're fucking for. Hey, I think I'm now. I got a question.